Guys, before you go into the live vlog, we'd just like to take this time to promote a book called Tales from the Pitch, or a series of books. And I was contacted by Daisy from Ransom Publishers, and they said that they're an independent publisher who specialises in literacy and books for people who don't like or struggle with reading, and they mainly sell to schools, bookshops and prisons. And they published a series of easy-to-read, fictionalised biographies of exciting footballers, and they've called it Tales from the Pitch. Now, because it's mcfcfantv, she sent me 2 copies, and this is one of the editions, which is about Raheem Sterling. So these books, I think, are really important. I obviously believe, I love reading myself, and I think literacy is really important. The age ranges between 7 and 14 years of age, but if you are an older person who struggles reading, they're perfect for people with dyslexia and other things that make people struggle to read as well. They're 120 pages long, and the recommended retail price is $6.99. Now, there is Van Dijk, Gnabry, Mbappe, Rashford, Kante and Lewandowski in the series alongside Raheem Sterling. So there are other different books, whether you don't have to be a supporter of Manchester City to read them. You can read the exciting biographies, fictionalised ones about other players as well. But Daisy kindly sent me 2 copies. What we're going to do is I'm going to read one of them, and then we're going to give both of them away, and to somebody who deserves it. So please, 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 all the details will be below, and you can get in touch with Ransom Publishers and order your copy online. So we wanted to do something that would assist them in pushing and promoting this book. Anyway, hope you enjoy it, and we'll let you know more about when these brilliant ideas for books and for reading become available as a prize. But anyway, it's Andy from mcfcfantv. Take care, and we're over to the vlog.
Good evening, Hall. Good evening, All. Good evening, All. And welcome to the latest edition of the Empty Seat Show with myself, Doom, and as you can see, he'll always be the ginger sidekick. Remember that. I'm Batman. You're Bobbin. How you doing, mate?
I'm all right, mate. It's been a great week for the club, hasn't it? 2 good away wins, mate. Another FA Cup winning for the women, and the youth team into the Youth Cup final tomorrow, mate. So they can put one over on Chelsea and this runners-up stuff that's been going on. And you got any idea how United got on?
Didn't they win?
What, United won?
I don't know. Didn't they get beat by some team who hasn't won it? Well, are United a top 6 team anymore? They're not really a top team, are they?
It's a perfect weekend then, Mark.
Yeah, big congratulations to the women. 3-1 winners down at Wembley Stadium, 3-1 in extra time. They did really well. So big congratulations to Gareth and all the girls over at the ladies team, bringing on the first piece of silverware of the season. It is amazing. Big commiserations to Cal, who's just appeared. Sorry, mate, I told you Everton were crap and we're going to go one way when they got to the top, and that was down, buddy. Sorry. Anyway, swiftly moving on. Now that's done. Chris, tell us all about tonight's guest, mate. Have you got any facts for us?
I do, mate. So tonight's guest's great-grandfather played for City when they were Ardwick FC in the 1890s. He was one of the 4,029 that stood on the Kippax for the full members cup tie against Leeds in the 85-86 season. And he plays drums in a heavy metal covers band in Sydney.
Oh, not another heavy metaler.
Oh, yes.
I'll tell you, I've got to say, I am a heavy metal fan. I love a lovely big piece of iron.
You get one wrapped around your Swede if you carry on. Get the guest on.
Do not get a bum off again. Right, I want to introduce you to someone who has got up again very early, all the way from Sydney. I want you to bring in football commentator, football analyst, everything. And he is also a Manchester City fan. He is a Blue himself, and he is gone. Again, we just love these Australian guests at the minute, don't we? I want to bring in Simon Hill. Good morning, Simon. How are you?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on your show. And you be careful with your references to heavy metal, mate, because
you just
me and Gloom, we're going to get you some.
Oh, yeah. I forgot 2 weeks.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us, Simon. So some of you may be unfamiliar with Simon, but let me fill you in a little bit. Simon works over in Australia as a football commentator, a bit like Martin Tyler. That's what Alan tells me. He's the Martin Tyler of Australia. He used to work for the BBC and ITV before relocating to Oz. And he's recently joined Optus Sport after many years working for Fox Sports. So before we start, Simon, name me your top 3 heavy metal bands.
Top 3 metal bands. I think at the top has got to be Iron Maiden. I'm a massive Maiden fan. I actually, as you mentioned in the intro, I play drums in a heavy metal cover band. We've actually got a gig tomorrow night, and we won the Battle of the Bands 6 weeks ago, so we're defending our title. So Maiden have got to be number 1. I think Motorhead and probably Judas Priest, but I could name 8, 9, or 10. But those would be 3.
Motorhead in my top 3.
While you two are talking heavy metal bands, I'm going to bring in some of those. That's all on the screen.
Okay.
Evening, Ronnie. Hope you're good. Andy Bloom, a great weekend. It was. We have some people live as joining us, Simon. So if you have got a question, Simon, hit the super chat button and you can ask him as long as it's sensible. Don't be asking any personal questions. I'm only joking. But yeah, first question I want to throw right at you, Simon, is first thing, thanks for joining us. As you know, we're about to go back into a lockdown in England.
Yeah.
How was your lockdown or time during this global pandemic?
Well, in Sydney, to be honest, we've had it pretty easy. Our numbers over here are relatively low. Melbourne had a big spike a couple of months ago, and they've been in quite a serious lockdown for some time, which caused a lot of consternation. But in Sydney and New South Wales, we had a short lockdown when it first started, March, April time, but that was quickly eased. And apart from the fact that we're not able to travel either internationally or even interstate because all the borders are locked down and have been for months, you wouldn't really know that there's a global pandemic in Sydney. There's a few people that, wearing masks around and about the place. But apart from that, our restrictions were eased some time ago. I was in the pub last night. It was actually my birthday yesterday. So I was in the pub with, a few, thank you, a few mates. Cheers, mate. So yeah, it's been okay. But it's that, sense of being trapped and that you can't travel anywhere. And when you're in a place like Australia, that really does feel like isolation because we're a long way from anywhere here.
Have you managed to get how's work been? Because have you had football still going on, sport going on over there? How's it been?
Yeah, the A-League season, which is the local competition here, it was postponed in common with all the other competitions around the world in March. It didn't come back until August. A lot of that was to do with the pandemic. Some of it was to do with the TV broadcast deal, which Fox Sports, my former employer, they sort of used the pandemic really to reduce the TV deal. They did the same with a lot of other sports, but football in particular suffered because of that. So we only got the last season completed in the last week of August. Now we're in the off season, but we're starting again in December. The other codes, sort of similar stories. Some came back earlier than others. But yeah, we just had the Aussie Rules Grand Final and the Rugby League Grand Final here a couple of weeks ago. Neither sport I'm particularly interested in, I have to say, but the stadiums were pretty much, well, I think the Rugby League was half full, so 40,000 in an 80,000 seater stadium, and the AFL Grand Final in Brisbane, I think that was a full house, near enough, 30,000 in a 38,000 seater stadium. So yeah, it's sort of almost back to normal, almost.
We only wish we could get 10 in a stadium right now. And
So, Simon, when did you know you wanted to pursue a career in sports journalism?
When I was 12 years old, actually, because I grew up in the north of England, same as you boys. And when I was 12, I was playing for a local club called Uttrington Rovers, and a Man City scout came to watch us, and I knew he was coming. A guy called Eric Malander, I think, was very famous at, bringing a lot of young kids through the City ranks. And I remember thinking, right, this is it. This is my big chance. I'm going to be a professional footballer. And of course, he never looked twice at me. He did actually sign our goalkeeper, a guy called Steve Crompton, who you might remember was part of the FA Youth Cup winning team of '86. Steve was and still is a big mate of mine. So Steve went on, and from that moment on, I think I knew that I didn't have what it took to be a professional footballer, but because I loved the game so much already by that age, I was brought up in it. My dad, my granddad, as you mentioned, my great granddad played for City in the 1890s, so I wanted to be involved in football, and the next best thing really was to be involved in journalism. I actually wanted to write. I had no interest in being a football commentator. I didn't think that was even possible. So I wanted to write. So that's, after I did my degree in the late 80s, then I did a postgrad degree, a postgrad course in newspaper journalism. So that's where it started.
So is it a competitive job area to get involved into?
Oh yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, I got lucky really that when I started my career, which is in 1991, which is a long time ago now, I applied for a lot of jobs. This was right in the middle of the UK recession at the time, so there weren't a lot of jobs in written journalism. I applied for a few, got nowhere, and I saw a job advertised in the Graduate Press for a commercial copywriter for a radio station in South Wales called Red Dragon FM, and I thought, you know what, that's probably as close as I'm going to get to writing, so I'll apply for that. So I applied for it, and they wrote back saying, look, don't think you're particularly suitable for this job, but we've got a vacancy here as a sports reporter if you're interested in applying for it. So you've got a bit of brief experience, and I'd written a few things for the local paper in Portsmouth where I was studying. So of course that was what I wanted to do all along. So I was like, yep. So I applied for that, got the job, and that's where it started really. My career took a different sort of direction right from the start, but I don't regret it. It's great.
What I am going to do, I might jump in with one or two questions from the comments as well, because I want to keep the people involved who are watching. So I'm just going to bring in one from Sean. Simon, who is your favourite player, past and current, City-wise at the moment?
Hiya, Sean. I love that photo, by the way, because that is my favourite City shirt of all time. My favourite player, I reckon a lot of City fans of my era will say the same thing, is Colin Bell. I grew up with posters of him all over my walls. I just idolised him. And I remember being devastated in '75 when Martin Buchan ended his career. I don't think he even got booked for that, did he? So Colin Bell is my all-time favourite. Current, well, up until last season, it would have been Vincent Kompany. Now I'd have to say Sergio. He's just a legend, isn't he? Those two.
Brilliant. So you moved then. Did you move to the BBC after that, Simon? After working away?
I did. Yeah, I moved to the BBC in '93. I had 2 years with Red Dragon, sort of learning my trade in South Wales, but I wanted to be in a football area. So I moved to BBC Radio Lancashire, actually, in Blackburn, and covered Blackburn Rovers in the days of Kenny Dalglish and Alan Shearer and David Batty and Tim Sherwood, all those guys. It was a very interesting time to be involved with that football club, because obviously they were going through their transformation at the time under Jack Walker, and the season after I left, they actually won the title. So maybe I should have stuck around for another 12 months. But I also covered Blackpool and Burnley and Preston. and cricket during the summer. So it was a great radio station to be involved in, and with the likes of Andy Peebles and John Gwynn, legendary reporters and commentators from back in the day. So that it was a great training ground for me. And my first commentary was actually in 1993. It's the first day of the 93-94 Premier League season, and it was Chelsea against Blackburn at Stamford Bridge. So that was some baptism of fire, and just the City link for that. My summariser that day was Colin Hendry, ex-City centre back. So yeah, great fella, Colin.
Had you left Blackburn, the radio station covering Blackburn, when City won 3-2 there? I don't remember. I think it was 94, 95.
Yes.
When Keith Curl scored that penalty, it was a really wet, gloomy. I think it was like a Monday evening.
Typical night at Blackburn.
Yeah, it was. I just remember that game as just phenomenal.
Yeah. I'd gone by then, but I remember that game. I think Uwe Rosler scored that.
Yeah,
Paul Walsh. Yeah, that's it. The days of Brian Horton, which I really enjoyed actually. But I'd left Radio Lancashire by then, but I did cover City. I had to call 2 City games, one of which was at Main Road, and I remember that being very awkward for me at the time. I didn't feel comfortable with that at all. A, because I was commentating for the other team, if you see what I mean. Yeah. But also because Main Road, my place wasn't in the press box at Main Road. I felt really uncomfortable. Like when I go to used to go to Main Road, Etihad now, my place is in the stands as a fan. I didn't want to be a reporter there or a broadcaster. Weird.
So you went for the BBC and then you went to ITV.
Yes, well, I spent the best part of a decade with the BBC. Worked for Radio 5 Live as a commentator for them, and World Service before that. And then in 2001, I was offered the chance, and at the time, I was like, "Wow, this is a great opportunity to go and work for the ITV Sport Channel, the ill-fated ITV Sport Channel." Obviously, I didn't know that when I signed for them, and 12 months later, we were all out of work, which was great. So because they didn't have a very good business plan, but it's all part of life's rich tapestry, as they say, and you live and learn. And it gave me some good experience to actually get the job over in Australia, and so that's what I did in 2003. And actually, if I can tell you a little story about how my move to Australia came about. Again, it was thanks to Man City, really. This is the common thread that runs through my life. So when I was at the BBC, I made friends with a guy called Rob Minshall, who was from Kersal, Salford boy, but a big City fan. And we used to go and watch some games, particularly the ones in London, during our time together at the BBC. And then many years ago, he emigrated to Australia long before I did. And I sort of stayed in touch with him, via letters, as it was back in the day before messaging and Facebook. And it was him who told me that there was a vacancy for a commentator at SBS, which became my first job in Australia. And I remember saying, "Why would they want me? I live thousands of miles. Oh no, you'd be great for this job, mate. You should stick in for it. They need a commentator like you." So I did, and that's why I ended up over here.
Was that a hard decision to relocate to the other side of the world, or?
Yeah, I mean it was, but at that point in my life, I was single. I had no kids. I still have no kids, and I decided that after my experience at ITV, which really left a sour taste in the mouth, I'd left the BBC, a very secure job, to take a bit of a chance with ITV in this new channel, and I thought that was going to be my my life for the next 10, 15 years or whatever. And within 12 months, it was all torn to pieces through no fault of our own, and we were all unemployed. And I was a bit bitter about that. And I was offered a job by Sky Sports at the same time as the offer came in from Australia, and the money for Sky was far better than I was being offered in Australia. But I just thought, what, if I don't try and do something a bit different, and I need to get my hunger back for it. So I thought this was a good opportunity to go and do something different. And let's be honest, who doesn't want to go and live in Sydney for a couple of years? So I thought, yeah, 3 years there will do me, and I'm still here. 17 years later.
Hang on, he's arrived. Here
he is. Hello, Alan.
The mind teller of Australia. He was on the phone to me last night telling me about this racetrack in Melbourne, driving me around it. I'm like, what are you telling me that for? Comes up with some things. Leonard, Diego says evening all. Go on. Oh, mate, I'm trying to think where we're up to now. Oh, here we go. Andy Blue Moon. Sorry.
So what was your first assignment then when you arrived in Australia?
My first assignment, blimey, that's a good question. Well, I think football-wise, it would have been the playoffs of the old National Soccer League. We don't have that league anymore in Australia. It's moved over to a fully professional era called the A-League. But when I arrived, the predecessor was the National Soccer League. And my first call was in, I think that was 2003 or 2004. It was between Marconi Stallions, which is a team of Italian sort of heritage, and South Melbourne, which is one of the Greek teams. And given 12 months prior to that, I'd been going to Premier League grounds and Championship grounds. This was a bit of a culture shock, let me tell you. Not least because it was played in summer, so I think it was about 40 degrees on that particular day, and I was sweating more than the players, I think, because I was new to Australia then, and the game wasn't up to much. But that was the first one. Yeah, it seems a long time ago now.
Yeah, when you mentioned it earlier about being in Main Road and being in the stands. When you've done City games as a commentator, what is it like to be? I know you've probably got to try and remain professional, impartial. Do you not feel like jumping up and going, how do you? I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
It's a funny thing that I don't do City games that often, to be honest. So it's not something that I have to deal with on a regular basis. But on the few occasions that I have called City games, I called one for Optus in the Champions League, the Real Madrid home game that we won 2-1, and I got a lot of people messaging me saying, "Is that not going to be really difficult for you?" Or well done on remaining professional, which I hope I did. It's funny when you get into the actual nitty gritty of the game. You almost switch the fan off for that 90 minutes because you have to. Otherwise, you just, you get accused of being unprofessional, and you would be unprofessional if you started, leaping up and down, when City scored. I find it a bit easier these days, probably because I've been away for so long. But back in the day, as I said, when I did that first game at Main Road, I felt very uncomfortable being in the press box, and B, calling a game involving my own team. That was tough. But once you've done it a few times, you sort of, you find a coping mechanism, I guess. But it's a little bit easier now. I'm geographically detached from them, if not emotionally.
So you didn't get to commentate on the QPR Premier League winning game?
I didn't, and I'll tell you why. Because I was there. I was at Etihad Stadium.
Even better.
Good man.
I'd to be honest, I came over for the derby because obviously with 3 games to go, after United drew with Everton that season, then it was on, wasn't it? And I remember saying to my partner, "I've got to go. I can't. If we're going to win the title for the first time in 40 odd years, I'm not being in Australia. I've got to be there." And she agreed and said, "Yeah, look, if you need to go, go." So I managed to get a ticket for the derby, the midweek derby that we won 1-0, thanks to Vincent Company. So I sat in the corporate area there. And then, of course, once we won that one, I was like, I can't go home now. I've got to go to the other 2 games. So I got a press ticket for the Newcastle away game, which was very hard. I had to sit in the press area. And when Yaya Toure scored late on, my mate who was in the press box with it literally held my hands to stop me jumping up and down, because obviously I had to be quiet in the press box. And then I think I paid £1,000 to get the QPR ticket. But, it didn't matter, did it? Because you just had to be there. So
and did you think that was
high up in the Colin Bell stand. It was brilliant.
Did you think that was £1,000 well spent after 93 minutes?
Oh no! I mean, you'll appreciate this, but it wasn't that both the best and the worst day of our lives all wrapped up into one. For 93 and a half minutes, that was the worst day of my life.
I didn't leave. Again, I was one who didn't leave in '99 at Wembley either.
Me too.
I just will not leave games early. I can't do it.
Can I tell you, my dad in '99, when Robert Taylor scored that second one for Gillingham, my dad went, right, he was literally out of his seat the moment it hit the back of the net. Right, that's it. I've got a long drive. I'm off. And I was like, hang on, Dad. No, I'm off. So he was halfway up the M40 when Nicky Williams was doing his dance.
I'll never forgive Robert Taylor for that. One, because he gave me the worst 20 minutes in my life. And then, because he scored against us, we went and signed him. So I was like, you just done us over twice there.
Yeah. we paid a lot of money for him.
Remember Robert Taylor? go and look him up. He did score a lot. Anyway.
Happy days.
I digress, yeah. What was your actual first game you went to? Or City or anyone, really?
In my first game, no, it was City. So it was April 1974. City against Ipswich, and we lost 3-1. Not that I knew. I think I was 5-6 years of age at the time. My dad took me, and I remember not being much interested at the time. But then when the next season came around, August 74, my dad said, do you want to go again? And I said, yeah. I remember that quite distinctly, even at that age, saying, yeah, no, I want to go. And my dad bought me, remember the old rosettes that you used to have? My dad bought me this sky blue rosette, and honestly, I don't know what it is. It's the magic of childhood, isn't it? There was something about that rosette and the sky blue that I just loved. Not that I had any choice anyway, because my dad and granddad were, City fans, but that was my connection to it. And watching the team come out in the sky blue jerseys, I just loved the colour. Absolutely loved it. So I could never have been a red. And I wouldn't have had any choice in it anyway. So, yeah, I was enrolled as a junior blue when I was 7, membership number 596. I used to go to branch meetings and get Joe Corrigan's autograph and Tommy Booth and Mike Doyle, all that stuff. So it's just, it's in my DNA because of my dad, really, and my granddad and, great-granddad.
I watched an interview you did. It was on YouTube. Yeah. And I love the part. I found it interesting. The Charlton game when we got promoted, and how you were talking about how you didn't like it because it was so compact, and then you having trouble moving. You couldn't get your arms up in the old Kippax, and I just felt really sort of and I know you were doing another interview at the time, and really, do people in Australia understand what English football can or was like and can be like? Because you see the A-League and you see the Premier League, and it's like night and day, and there doesn't seem to be the passion there. I mean, we had a chat with Alan about it as well, and he says it is a lot different.
Look, it is different. I mean, sport in general in Australia is different. They consume it in a different way. Certainly, football-wise, the A-League is a new competition. The clubs are still very young, so they don't have much history. The stadiums are too big. So that that's why it looks as devoid of atmosphere, because sometimes they play in stadiums of 50,000 with only 10,000 people in it. So that doesn't help. And of course, we play the game here in summer, so quite often it's over 30 degrees, which doesn't help the pace of the game. You don't feel much like jumping up and down, chanting and making a noise when you're virtually sunbathing in the stands. So it's different. But do they understand it? Oh yeah. I mean, the Premier League has a cult following over here. There's a lot of people very invested. Most of them, obviously, Liverpool, United, Arsenal to a certain extent. But there's City supporters groups here as well. I have to say that most of our supporters are people like me. They appear to be expat Manx, but there's a few Aussies as well. So they understand it and they love it. I mean, they love the Premier League. You know, they get up in the middle of the night to watch their team, and a lot of them make pilgrimages over to, you know, the stadiums that they love and have watched on TV. So, yeah, they get it. They get it.
Well, Ronnie Beaver, regular of ours, says Simon's childhood sounds like mine, probably at the junior blues at the same time.
Yeah.
And Andy Blue Moon, another regular. What a top guy Simon is. We have had a super chat, Simon, from Andy, who is the guy who runs the channel for mcfcfantv. Says, hi, Simon, where do you live in Sydney? I used to live in Darlinghurst and Paddington.
Yeah.
And what other sports would you like to cover that you haven't so far? Good question.
Very good question. I know Darlinghurst and Paddington very well. They're not too far from me. I actually live in the inner west of Sydney, a place called Annandale, which is just over the Anzac Bridge for those who know Sydney. In terms of other sports, look, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I'm a mad sports fan. I'm not really. I just love football. So I have covered other sports, and I've done things that I've enjoyed, like I've covered international cricket. I've commentated on Lord's one-day finals back in the day when I was at the BBC. I did 2 years at Wimbledon doing the tennis. I did the Le Mans 24-hour motor race. I've done boxing. But really, the only thing that's missing off my list of things that I want to do is actually an Olympics, as in being there. I've covered an Olympics, but not actually at the venue. So I've done a lot of World Cups, 6 World Cups. So I think an Olympic Games would be nice before I retire. But
I would always love to. Not that I ever would, but I want to go to a Formula One race. That's right. Me. I want to go to proper.
You're a petrol head.
No, I'm not so much petrol, but I do want to go to a Formula One. I'd love to go to Silverstone for the weekend.
You're more of a meathead, aren't you, Martin? So,
whereas we're metalheads, me.
Yeah, we're mad, exactly.
Ignoring ginger head. Carry on.
So, is there any era that really resonates with you with being a City fan?
Yeah, I think you know, your first era as a kid is always the one that has the most impact on you, and for me, that was the 70s. I mentioned Colin Bell, who was my absolute idol. I only sort of caught the tail end of Mike Summerby and Franny Lee because they were moved on pretty quickly. But I would say, you know, that team of the mid to late 70s, Joe Corrigan, Kenny Clements, Willie Donachie, Mike Doyle. See, I can rattle them all off even now. Dave Watson, Alan Oakes, Peter Barnes, Tommy Booth, Brian Kidd, Asa Hartford, Dennis Stewart. You know, that was the era I grew up watching City and loved those players. And we should have won the league 77. I was there the night that Dave Watson and Big Joe had the mix-up and David Fairclough stole in to score the equaliser. I worked with David many years later. I remind him of that a lot. So, yeah, that was my era, really.
They were a great team as well, weren't they? That's the era for me as well, is the Stewart and Barnes are still heroes of mine. Definitely.
I'm too young.
Yeah, you're too young, mate.
Hey, but my dad
what's your era, Doom?
My era was the late 80s, early 90s, going into there.
Oh, right.
But my dad used, well, he played for the reserves and he got offered a contract for City, but there was no money back then in the game, so he took a full-time job, unfortunately. But he went to school with the late. He was in the same class as the late great Bernard Alford. So
right.
yeah. So I'm just showing off my dad's age now, showing that he is actually really old. But we have had another super chat from Alan. Thank you so much for that, buddy. Simon Hill has a book out. We were going to mention this later on, Alan, but you've jumped in and preempted it, mate, but no worries. Simon has a book out called Simon Hill, Just a Gob and a Stick. Great read. Talks about City's past, etc. on Amazon. So there you go.
Thanks, Alan. Good fella.
Hey.
Keep the money rolling in.
Since you moved to Australia, then City have had the makeover of all makeovers.
Yeah.
Do you still feel the same affiliation to the club as you did back then?
It's a good question. I think it's changed a little bit. Look, City is and will always be my club. they're deep in my heart. But I think that you have a distance, not just geographically, but when you don't live in Manchester or even the UK, and you can't get to the games, and you're not seeing your mates on a regular basis who support City, there's got to be a little bit of a separation. And I think that the money that's been brought into the club, whilst I would never turn down the trophies, they've been great. But there is a part of me that misses being crap. Because we're now sort of we're despised almost in the same way as United and Liverpool in some ways, and I quite enjoyed that sort of underdog. So I'm going to sound like a real stick in the mud here, aren't I? But I miss some of the days when you go to a game against a Luton or a Colchester and think, I'm not sure we're going to win today. Whereas, now, unless you're playing one of the big six or in the Champions League, 9 times out of 10, we're going to win.
I think, me and Martin feel exactly the same way, don't we, Martin?
Yeah.
Yesterday, for example, we won 1-0. We did a great defensive performance, and everyone's moaning because we didn't win 5-0.
Yeah,
so
I know.
It's like we've now gone from we have to win and play with a certain I just feel a little bit like some of us have come a bit elitist.
Yes.
And
yes,
I do like, it's where I do have a soft spot for the good old bad old days, shall we say.
Well, the other thing is, like, living here in Sydney, obviously I mentioned how popular the Premier League is. Now, when I moved over here in 2003, I probably owned the only Man City shirt in Sydney, apart from the other expats, obviously. Nowadays, you'll walk along and you won't see a huge amount of City shirts, but you'll see some, young kids wearing City shirts. And then you talk to some people. I remember having a conversation with somebody who said, they were a City fan. I was like, oh, okay. But he was obviously Australian. He obviously hadn't grown up in Manchester. And he didn't have much of a clue of, the history of the club. I'm not saying that's typical of everybody, but there was almost like I don't know, that's my club. It's got nothing to do with you. This is my club, which is a bit selfish on me, really. But anyway.
No.
Well, Andy Bloom in here, the good old days, Jerry Crary and Barry Conlon.
Oh,
someone's been listening to me because we used to have something called Man City Kingdom, and that was whoever could mention. It was like a thing for me because I used to mention Jerry Crane and Barry Conlon all the time because I used to say Barry Conlon looked like something from a Sunday League pub team who just thought what a prize and got in the Man City team.
I bet you did. I bet you didn't mention Kakaba Shkadadze too often, did you?
People. Oh yeah. Kabalashvili and all them.
That's Australia, where we had a whole period of signing champions, didn't we? Because of Georgia.
Sure that was to make Gio happy. We'll just get him to sign a new contract, so we'll buy all your mates.
Yeah. Bring some food with you when you come over.
Yeah. We want to move on now to more. We've had talk about the history, and it's really, really interesting. I've seen the comments; people have really, really enjoyed it, Simon. I want to talk a little bit more now, a little bit about the City in the media and the cartel, as we like to call it, and everything else. But Arno, the CFG obviously made several acquisitions across the globe, Melbourne City, and we've heard from Alan how it used to be Melbourne Heart, and they haven't taken to us, and they don't really like us, and things like that. So, what are your thoughts on the strategy that City have got globally, and also, is it just Melbourne they don't like City, or they don't like the way it was done? What is it they don't like about us?
I don't know whether it's that they don't like the City Football Group. I think it's that they don't feel any particular affiliation to it. Now, if you look at it from an objective point of view, if, for example, it was the United Football Group that had gone into Melbourne and bought Melbourne Heart on behalf of Manchester United, would we as City fans go and support that club? I don't think we would we? So I think we have to understand that in Melbourne, which is a very passionate sporting city, if you're a football fan and you follow the Premier League in Melbourne, more likely than not, you're going to be a United fan a Liverpool fan, Arsenal, maybe Chelsea, or somebody else. So when you've got a club that is affiliated so strongly with Manchester City, it plays in sky blue, it runs out to the tune of Oasis, makes no secret of the fact that it's linked to Manchester and run from Manchester. There's a disconnect there. You can't, in my opinion, run a club in Melbourne from Manchester because you have no local understanding of what people want. That it'd be like City being taken over by a consortium in Melbourne, but being run from Melbourne. You go, well, what do these guys know about Manchester? So I think there's a bit of a disconnect there that we have to sort of understand. It's not that they just don't like City. It's the fact that they haven't connected well enough with the community in Melbourne. And I think little things like, okay, the sky blue, I get that because, that's the brand that City want to build. But I don't know, running out to Oasis, is that the right thing? It's great for me. I'm a Manc. But people in Melbourne aren't. What does that say to them? Does it say anything to them? So I think if you're building that local brand, you have to be in that local market, and they haven't done that well enough. The other thing, sorry, I won't go on too long about this, but there's one other thing about the City Football Group. When they bought into the A-League, we all thought, myself included, and I broke the story, by the way, back in 2014, we all thought, brilliant, this is liftoff for the A-League because the City Football Group will come in and spend some money and really boost the profile. They'll bring in a couple of marquee players, big names, like they've done in America with Beckham and one or two others. It's never happened. And that, I think, is disappointing for a lot of people, myself included. I've spoken to Brian Marwood about it, and we always have a laugh and a joke. He calls me the miserable Manc, and he's probably right. But I think they could have done more in the Melbourne market to make that connection and try and get some of those casual supporters along. They say there's no business return in it. Well, the business return is they get young Australian players for nothing, like Aaron Moy. Take them over to Man City, and then they flog them for $15 million and make a profit. That's the business return for them. Yeah. So I don't think they've done quite enough. And I'll say one more thing: in the 6 years that they've owned Melbourne City, we have not seen one Manchester City player here in Australia, as in to play for Melbourne City. Not one. I think that's really disappointing, to be honest.
Do you think the fact that they haven't brought in a marquee player has anything to do with the salary cap, or is it?
No, well, the marquees are outside the salary cap, so
right, okay.
It doesn't matter what you pay your marquees. And look, they have sort of dabbled around the edges. They brought David Villa over here, but he only stayed 4 games before
Tim Cahill signed as well.
Say again?
Tim Cahill signed as well.
He did. Yep. Tim Cahill played here for a year, and to be fair, that didn't really work. Maybe they got bruised by that experience. I don't know. They did try and bring Frank Lampard over here. When he was still playing before he was manager at Chelsea. And he wanted to come by all accounts, but that got stymied by politics, which would take another podcast to go through. So look, it's not that they haven't dabbled around the edges, and they've done some very good things in Melbourne. They've built a mini replica of the Etihad training complex in Melbourne for a cost of about $20 million, which is absolutely fantastic. Best in the country here. So I'm not saying that everything that they've done is wrong, but I think they could have done a bit more, to be honest. That's my journalist hat on you.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I'm just thinking, because I know they came, remember, was it 2014, and Pellegrini came over for them all. And I mean, I'm presuming that was just, I know it was pre-season, but maybe a bit of a PR exercise as well to try and get them on. Just bought Melbourne, and away we went with the team, and I don't know.
I think you have to look at the way that the City Football Group is structured. Now, obviously, Manchester City is at the top, and that's correct. That's the way it should be because they're the big club. Then you've got New York City, which is the second cog in the wheel because it's a massive city, and there's obviously a lot of dollars in there for it. It's a business, We can't get blinded by the fact that we're all in love with City. This is a business for CFG as much as anything else, and their Emirati owners. And Melbourne City probably comes, third, maybe even fourth in the list of clubs that they've got. But for us here in Australia, who want to build the A-League brand and football in this country, I think it's been a bit disappointing, to be honest. But that's just me.
We have had another super chat from Amanda, who would like, thank you very much again, brother. You could invite 3 footballers, an actor, and a musician to dinner.
Wow.
One night only.
3
I think you want to do a come dine with me, but
are we going on Curry Mile and Rusholme? Is this where we're going? 3 footballers. Okay. Well, I'll have Colin Bell because obviously he was my hero, and I hope he's better soon. By the way, I know he's not too well at the moment.
Yeah, we won't say it. Yeah,
don't worry. So I'd certainly have Colin. 2 other footballers. Well, I've met Pele, so I'll have to go for Maradona, but he doesn't speak English, so I guess the third person would have to be an interpreter, and a third footballer. Vincent Kompany, I think. He'd be fascinating, wouldn't he? To sit and have a
would.
Yeah, those 3. An actor, I'll have Angelina Jolie, please.
I'm with you all the way so far.
And a musician, unfortunately, he'd have to be exhumed, but my all-time drumming hero is a guy called Neil Peart, who was a drummer with Rush and unfortunately passed away only earlier this year. So, yeah, I'll take him for a curry. You fancy a curry, do you, Neil? You all right? Yeah. Come on, Angelino. Take
I'm sorry.
Well, there's a percentage in the CFG, yes. That's why a lot of signings are going out there.
Yeah, Girona is, and it's. Yeah. I mean, that's a little bit naughty, that story as well. You know that story. So that it sits at CFG owned 44%, and you know who owns the other 44%. There's a guy called Pep Guardiola, who just happens to be Pep's brother.
Yeah.
So I think Ivanovic is going in January there.
Just to move on quickly from there. So do you think City are seen as a serious threat now to the old order? Are they becoming more popular away from Manchester, I suppose, specifically in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, globally, I think in terms of fan base, obviously we've got a long way to go because we're coming from a long way back. It's only 20 years ago we're in the 3rd division, as I well remember, when at places like York and Wrexham. So I think still when you go to most places, you will find Liverpool, United. Those are the 2 clubs that have the most supporters. There's others, Arsenal, Chelsea, as I mentioned, but it's growing. And the more success, you have, I think the more people will jump on board. I think that's just human nature. As I say, when I came here, you didn't see any City shirts. Now you'll see a smattering of them. So maybe, if we keep going the same way in 10 years, then we'll be that genuine threat to the old order in terms of fan base. But I think we already, on the pitch where it really matters, we are already.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, thinking about that, obviously we're not liked very much by the media over here, like you said earlier on. Is that, because obviously you're within the media, is that something you perceive, you agree with, or are we just all being paranoid as City fans?
No, I think a lot of it's paranoia. I've had a go at Sir Alan about this because he constantly messages me going, "What about this? This is a Liverpool conspiracy." I'm like, it's not. It's just a good story. The media is interested in good stories, basically. I think probably some of the owners of the other clubs, the old G14 clubs, I think their dislike of us is pretty real, to be honest, because we threaten their hegemony. We threaten their money. That's why they brought in financial fair play in the first place. This is why they want a European Super League, because City and PSG and Chelsea have found a way to circumvent their little cartel, and they don't like that very much. But in terms of the media, I mean, I get accused. I've done 1,000 football games as a commentator, and everywhere you go, you get accused of being biased for this team, against this team. I don't know how many teams I'm supposed to support, down the years. But I always say, look, there's only, one team in my heart, And I've always been open about it. So I don't think the media has a bias towards or against any team. It's just that whatever sells the most newspapers, whatever gets the most viewers, that's what they care about.
Yeah. So City were mentioned as being included in the Big Six for the big picture proposal.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the cartel clubs using the COVID situation to enhance their positions?
Disgraceful. And I include City in that, to be honest. At a time when clubs like Macclesfield Town and Bury are struggling so badly, well, they've both gone out of existence. And there are other clubs like Southend, Wigan, who are really doing it tough during this COVID period. And to use this period to set in train plans to try and break away and grab more power and more money. To be honest, I think it's despicable. And I think that's if it comes about, it would be the one thing that would sort of turn me away a little bit from football. I'll always love it, but this is not football. It can't be allowed to happen.
No.
It's wrong, in my opinion.
No.
Absolutely.
Andy wants to say Liverpool are run from Boston, Simon. Winky face.
Yeah, but they've got people on the ground. A lot of people on the ground in Liverpool. But I know what you mean. I
think it's because of, like you said, I think a lot of the paranoia, shall we say, that we've probably got is because of where it all leaked from, and we had all the FFP and everything that Liverpool have been, with their history of their owners and everything else, and Standard Charter and everything else. I think we're all a bit, well, why are we not being investigated and we are?
Look, I totally agree on the financial fair play stuff, that there is a bias against City and PSG and any club who threatens that little, boys club. Totally agree with that. I don't think it's a media-led thing. I think it's a club-led thing, because they want to keep that money. I mean, you go back in time, even to the setting up of the Premier League, that was driven by the old Big Five, of which we weren't a part of in those days. And that was about money. And then the expansion of the European Cup into the Champions League was about money, and that was driven by the G14. And now all of a sudden we're the interlopers, because getting a sugar daddy was the only way to compete with these clubs. And they don't like it. They didn't foresee that. So that's why FFP was, maybe not why it was brought in initially, because I think it was actually brought in with good intentions, but it's been twisted around to benefit the old G14 clubs.
Well, that's why I don't really want to be. I can't get my head around or agree with this big picture or European Super League. I know it might happen, because I just think we can't sort of bitch and moan about the cartel and UEFA, and then we go and jump along with the wagon of the European Super League and leave everyone else behind. It's like, well, it's a bit two-faced of us all to go and do that, really.
Absolutely. Look, I totally agree, and that's why I'm saying I include City in that with regards to these proposals for the Super League, because if we're going to be a part of that, then we're as guilty as everybody else, and we shouldn't be doing that.
What do you think? Why do you think it's coming out now, Simon? Why do you think this European Super League and the big picture is this? I've got my own thoughts on this, that some of these big teams like Manchester United and Barcelona are so heavily in debt that they're not getting the money through the doors now at the minute. Is that they're seeing some really dark times ahead of them if COVID doesn't go away for a long time?
I think that's a big part of it. But I also think, going back to FFP, the fact that City got away with it, if you want to call it that, because let's be honest, it looks pretty clear that we broke some rules. Let's be honest about it. But we got away without the Champions League ban. So maybe all those clubs feel, well, FFP is now dead in the water. It can't be enforced. So how do we keep our hegemony? And the only way to do it is to invite the likes of City and PSG. Okay, we didn't want you as part of the boys' club, but reluctantly we will accept you as part of the boys' club. Now, you come with us and we'll exclude everybody else. It's, these are power grab games, and they're wrong for football. And as much as I dislike UEFA for what they did to us, they're right to say this shouldn't happen, because if it does, it will destroy football. What happens to the Premier League, for example, if City, United, Liverpool, Arsenal go off and play in this Super League? Do they play reserve teams in the Premier League? Do they leave the Premier League altogether?
Would imagine that would be the what most other clubs would want, for them to go, really, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
the fans.
Well, exactly. What about the fans? So, for example, if City are playing, Juventus away on a Saturday, how expensive is that for fans, to fly everywhere? I mean, we have that situation here in Australia, and what it essentially means is that apart from when you play local derbies, there are very, very few away fans, which destroys the atmosphere inside stadiums as well. Part of that, the great thing about the Premier League is the tribalism, because everybody's close enough to be able to travel, to one ground or another. But if you do away with that, and you're just having these, teams from all over Europe, then the away fan is pretty much going to become a thing of the past. You can't afford to do it every other weekend, surely.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the most important thing for me at the minute is that the Premier League do the right thing by the lower league teams. No, don't need to stick any of these sort of, stuff on top of it. Just give them the money to get out of the trouble that they're in.
Absolutely.
I think it's disgusting, And we're lucky enough.
They tried to con them with we'll give you 250 million, but you give us all the voting rights and we reduce the Premier League and we do what we want, basically. And when they said no, then they went back and said, okay, it's 50 million, which they rejected rightly.
It's absolutely disgraceful, I think. We're lucky. City are a big team now, but, had Sheikh Mansour not come in, had Joe Royal not, and Andy Morrison and people like this who elevated City before Sheikh Mansour came in, we could be one of these teams now who are just going by the wayside. And you just look at it and you think, looking back,
we were very close. We were very, very close on more than one occasion of going bye-bye.
And football clubs are a massive part of communities in this country. And I think this sort of, I'm not saying we're selling out to foreign investors and stuff like that, but they don't have the same love like we have for our clubs.
Yeah, look, it's difficult because we're not inside the heads of those owners, so you don't know what their motivations are. But it appears from the outside that finance is a big part of it. They've been attracted by the global appeal of the Premier League. That's not to say that they don't grow to love the club, but I think what is more concerning is that they appear to have little love for the system outside the Premier League. And that's one of the beauties of English football, that we do have 4 full-time professional divisions. If we lose all those clubs, I think that would be an absolute tragedy for the game in England, because it's part of who we are as a football nation. Definitely. And it's starting to happen already, Bury, Macclesfield, who's next?
Yeah, absolutely.
Last week, and he was saying about that with Southend, how they're so close to going out. I want to move on to Messi. Chris is Mr. Gloom's favourite subject. Was it all a political play, or does he really want to come?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that question. What was the...
Does Messi really want to come to City?
Messi.
Or is it all a political gameplay?
I mean, obviously, I don't know because I've not spoken to him directly. But
just in your opinion of it.
I think he quite fancies it, to be honest, for a couple of reasons. A, it's a different experience for. Was he now 33? And he's pretty much done everything he can do with Barcelona. I know he's very much sort of synonymous with that club, but he's clearly unhappy there. So I think he wants to move away. City would probably be the only one of maybe 2 or 3 clubs that could afford him. But also, of course, it's back with Guardiola, who's like his spiritual mentor. And I think it would be a win-win for both parties, really. Messi gets his move, gets to play with Guardiola, maybe a fresh challenge, reinvigorate himself a little bit after all this, the troubles he's been through. And for us, now we talked earlier about, our City about to threaten the top 6 in terms of global fan bases. That's the sort of transfer that could do it. Because I don't know what it's like in Manchester these days, but I walk around Sydney and you'll see more Leo Messi and Barcelona jerseys than anything else. They just love him, kids. I think kids these days grow up loving players more than clubs. For us, it was about the club. Today, it seems to be about Messi or Ronaldo or Zlatan or whoever. So I think that could be a transfer that sort of sends us into the stratosphere globally, which is probably why they want to do it. So yeah, I think it's a fair chance of him coming, to be honest.
And it might help towards the 171 million euros that they're paying the next 5 days.
Yeah,
right, come on. So just noticing the time now. So the week ahead and it's been a good week. It's been a bit of a disjointed start to the season, but in Marseille on Tuesday we saw a recognisable Pep Manchester City display. Any thoughts as to why we looked a bit more like our old selves against Marseille?
I don't know, really. Look, I think it helped that Marseille were, let's be honest about this, they were a bit crap. But I don't know, the fluency sort of just came together, didn't it, in that game? They were on top, and I think crucially, and this is what didn't happen at Sheffield United on Saturday, we got the second goal. If you get the second goal, you've got that breathing space, that buffer, and the team seems to be able to relax and, dominate. Now, against Sheffield United on Saturday, and obviously I watched this game, it seemed to me a bit of the same old story. We dominate the first half, we get the goal, great finish by Kyle Walker, but we couldn't get that second goal, and we could so easily have dropped points again in the end. Sheffield United, all right, only probably 2 clear-cut chances, but one of those goes in, all of a sudden again, and I think that's been the sticking point for a long time now. So it's my real frustration with Pep's team at the moment, to be honest. Not that they're not good enough; they're brilliant to watch. Yeah. But have they got that killer instinct? That I watched them against West Ham the other week, and we're in the 94th minute. 3 minutes of stoppage time, and we're into the 4th minute, and we win a corner. I'm like, get it in the box. We're almost out of time, and they play it short and try and pass it around. Referee's whistle goes. No, I know that's the way they play, but sometimes, do you want to win the game, or do you want to be easy on the eye?
Yeah. Well, exactly what I come back to earlier with this. We went and won 1-0, and everyone was moaning. Like, we're not 1-5-0.
I know. Yeah, we did win.
Good point. It's one of our questions, this. Diaz and Laporte. Do you feel confident now with that back line? Because, I think Saturday we did a watch-along on the channel, and it's the most comfortable I've felt defensively for a long time with those two at the back.
Yeah, they look a lot better, don't they? Diaz has brought sort of a stability. I think they've conceded, 3 goals in the 7 games that he's played in all competitions, which tells its own story, really. He is, or he appears to be, exactly what we needed. And the fact that Laporte is now back fit again, Walker's having a sensational season. I don't know what Pep's done with him during the brief off-season, but he looks a different player. I've still got a question mark at left-back. I'm not sold on Mendy. Great going forward. Defensively, positionally, for me, he's all over the place, and I think he's a bit of a liability, to be honest. But apart from that, yeah, we got 3 out of the 4 positions sorted.
Do you think Ake could fill that role?
Well, he can. I mean, he's played there. I don't think he was bought for that, though, was he? No. Specifically. Yeah, look, it's a possibility. I mean, to be honest, I don't mind Zinchenko there. I prefer Zinchenko to Mendy defensively. You're not a fan?
Martin's favourite player?
Not for you,
absolutely garbage.
Worse than Mendy?
Yeah. Zinchenko should be nowhere near the football pitch for me.
I don't think he's the long-term solution either. I was just saying from what we have. from what we have at the moment, I think he's a better option than Mendy. I love Mendy going forward. I think he's terrific, but defensively, no.
Not Andy's favourite player.
Yeah, look, he's solid enough. I don't think it's not his natural position, really, is he? I know he can play either side, but yeah. I think that's the one. If we're going to split hairs, I think that's the one position that we still need a bit of quality.
So they're all laughing at me.
I agree.
Everybody's got Zinchenko every week. Sorry.
Simon, what are your thoughts on Phil Foden?
Love him. After David Silva retired, the one thing I was really looking forward to was seeing Phil Foden start a lot more games. And I think he's going to do that this season. He changed the game against West Ham the other week when he came off the bench. I'll be starting him every week. Absolutely love him. And because he's a local kid as well, obviously that's
Silva for me. So
silky. David scored again today.
Has he?
Yeah, scored a header.
What?
Scored a header. Exactly. David Silva's now scoring headers.
Wow. A much neglected part of his game at City, clearly.
The ball come in and he flicks it on. It goes in off the post. It was like, and isn't it funny how Sociedad and we're at the top or near the top since El Mago went over. It tells you what a great player he is, isn't it?
He is. Yeah, terrific.
Yeah. Big week coming ahead, Sam. We're going to come towards the end now. Big week coming ahead. Olympiacos on Tuesday. I mean, tomorrow night, I will say, we've got the Youth Cup final against Chelsea tomorrow. The youngsters get their big chance. So we might pick up a second piece of silverware in 24 hours. You never know. Olympiacos Tuesday. And then this time next week, we will know the outcome of the big one. City versus Liverpool. What do you think?
That's the one I want to win. Not that I don't want to win against Olympiacos, but I think we'll go through the group stage anyway. We've got to put ourselves in a good position, and we're in the Champions League. But it's difficult for Pep to manage his squad as well, given the injuries we got. With Fernandinho and Aguero and Jesus. So he's got to sort of manage all that, which is tricky. But I reckon he'll have one eye on that Liverpool game. We got to turn them over, haven't they? God, I know it's the same in the UK, but God, they're painful over here. Plastic scousers, I'm over them. So we've got to shut them up.
So you think Pep will put a strong team out against Olympiacos?
I think he sort of has to, doesn't he? I know that he'll be looking at that Liverpool game and thinking perhaps if I've got two players that are similar in quality. I wouldn't be surprised if if he's fit, if RK starts against Olympiacos. I think that's one change he could definitely make. But he's a bit light on in the attacking side of things because of those injuries. So, but I think he has to. I think he has to play a full strength team because we're not qualified yet. You can't afford to take the risk and hope that they don't get injured and that they can back up against Liverpool. There's a lot of games coming thick and fast at the moment, and they've had that only pre-season. It's difficult.
I think that if we beat Olympiacos, and we should do, then we're pretty much guaranteed to progress through the group stages. So there's 3 games that we can sort of look at maybe the younger players and save the first team for the Premier League games. I think the Liverpool game, obviously, we beat them 4-0 at the end of last season when maybe they were a little bit sozzled. I don't know, but that seemed to be a bit of a walk in the park, really. But
I don't think it will be this time.
Throws himself on the floor again.
Well, the good thing is that we've got injuries in attack, but they've got problems in defence, haven't they? With there's no Van Dijk and Fabinho's out. Don't know whether he will be next weekend, but fingers crossed, eh?
Yeah,
big game, big game.
Will we win the title then, Simon? I've got one more after this, and I'm going to leave you on a real barnstorm as well.
Okay. Will we win the title? Yeah, I actually tipped us before the start of the season. I think we'll come through the pack. I think it'll be probably around Christmas time before we sort of hit the top. But I think once the injuries heal, yeah, I'm pretty confident. I think we'll do it.
Good.
Hope so.
And Andy Blue Moon got my last question. Is he going to stay or is he going to go?
I don't know. This is a tough question, isn't it? I think he wants to stay. I mean, he said this week that this link with Barcelona for him to go back under the new president, he said he's not interested. That's over. I think Pep feels in some ways he's still got a bit to prove at City. He's got to win the Champions League. I think if we had a Champions League trophy in the bank, maybe he'd be looking to move on. But I think until that happens, it's almost become his own personal holy grail as well, because he's not won it in 9 years. Mm-hmm. And that crown of being, the best coach, the best manager in the world, started to slip. Let's be honest about it. So, and he's got a rebuilding job on his hands. And again, everybody says, he only ever stays 3 or 4 years. He doesn't do rebuilds, and he can only do it with money and blah, blah, blah. So I think this is arguably the biggest challenge of his career. He's got to win the Champions League and he's got to rebuild a squad. And I think he quite fancies that. So yeah, I think he'll stay. I think 12 months ago I might have said something different, but I think where we sit now, I think he'll stay.
And how much do you rate Pep?
Look, he's brilliant. You look at the records that he's set with our club, and he's the best manager we've ever had. There's no doubt about that. Sometimes he does frustrate. Who am I to question Pep Guardiola?
No. I think we're all the same.
Yeah, I always think, this is just ridiculous, me questioning him. But sometimes he does frustrate me. He frustrates me with his team selection. He certainly frustrated me with his team selections against Lyon. And I called that game as well, by the way. That was difficult. Yeah. I couldn't get my head around that at all. I think he overthinks things a bit when it gets to the latter stage of the Champions League. As I say, I think at times the style of play, while it's beautiful to watch, they overdo it a little bit. But yeah, can you argue with a domestic treble, 100 points, 100 odd goals every season, Kevin De Bruyne, all these players that we have the privilege of watching every week? Yeah, it's pretty good. It's better than York away 20 odd years ago with Craig Ross.
I think he's got a 75% win rate, which is just obscene. It's fantastic.
Greatest manager ever for me. It's out of this world.
It beats the. I don't know if you're at Main Road the day that Jamie Pollock scored that own goal.
Yeah, a great goal.
That was there's 2 moments in my life where I've just turned to a mate and gone, "That's City," and that was one of them.
Yeah.
And because it was such a comedy own goal, and the other one was at York where we lost 2-1. Battered them for 90 minutes, and they threw on an 18-year-old kid to try and soak up a bit of pressure, and he scored with his first kick in professional football. Andy Dawson. That was the only goal he ever scored in his career.
Sure doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't.
Wow.
And I was on the terrace behind the goal. I don't know if you were there that day, and it was absolutely splashing down the rain. And I was there with my dad, and I just said to my dad, "That's it. I can't do this anymore. This is too hard."
Stood up in absolute pen. We had a big fence in front of us, like gate. It was just, it was
horrible.
It was awful. But I tell you what,
to build
it. No dick off, no nothing. It was just one of them days where you just want to forget. I really did. But I was at the Wrexham one as well on Boxing Day when Beacon scored. And that was like that, and the Stoke game 2 days later at Main Road was like those were the 2 games where it sort of turned on that season, didn't it?
Yeah, and Andy Morrison,
big Andy.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Blue Hearts on the right one. Change MC to Winch first. Blue Hearts on one. I don't know why. We're not allowed opinions anymore. He's on one at the minute. I just want to say that, Simon, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Oh, pleasure, guys.
Pleasure to sit down and talk to you, and about a number of subjects, a number of areas. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I just want to say on behalf of myself and the channel, thank you so much.
Pleasure,
Yeah.
guys. Real
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. And yeah, City till I die.
Brilliant, mate. I'd really say really great opinions. Thank you so much, mate. You've been a fantastic guest. So thank you very much, Simon.
No problem.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
I want to thank everyone in the comments, especially the super chats, Amanda, and from Alan over in Melbourne. Very generous. Thank you so much. Just to remind you all, guys, we're going to give it a bit of a rest next week because there's a little game next Sunday afternoon that we'll be concentrating on more. I think we're playing some team down the M62, some little farmer team. What they called? Some at pool. I can't remember what they're called. But they're coming up the M62 to play us. Yes, it's City against Liverpool. So that's why there will be no empty seat show next week. But we will be back in 2 weeks' time, I promise you. And also join us tomorrow night for the Youth Cup final watch along. 7:15, I'll be on air. And let's see what the future looks like for Manchester City. Should be a good one. But I want to say thank you to Simon. Again, thank you to Gloom. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great week. Don't get yourself too down. If you need to have a chat, you know our email. Take care. Thanks for coming on. And as always, up the Blues.
Up the Blues.
Take care, guys.